I'll be honest with you. I taught European history for 9 years. I covered World War I, World War II, the Cold War. I showed my students maps of the Western Front, the Normandy beaches, the Berlin Wall, and in all of that time, I never once dedicated a single lesson to Belgium. The country where the trenches were, the country where the EU was born. The country whose king personally owned a territory in Africa larger than all of Western Europe combined, and what he did there changed the definition of what a crime against humanity even means. I didn't teach it because I didn't know it, and I didn't know it because somehow, for a country that has shaped the modern world more than almost any other, Belgium is the most invisible, important place on Earth. My name is James Callahan. I taught high school history in Portland, Oregon. One of my students, a kid named Tyler, 16 years old, sharper than I deserved, asked me a question I couldn't answer. He said, "Mr. Callahan, if Belgium is so small, why does every major thing in history keep happening there? Waterloo, Ypres, the Battle of the Bulge, the founding of the European Union, NATO headquarters, the Congo." He had a point I had been missing for 9 years. The answer took me to a country the size of Maryland that has been at the center of everything and somehow stayed invisible while doing it. What I found when I got there, I still don't have the right frame for. Let me try to show you instead. Belgium is 30,000 square kilometers. To put that in terms an American can feel, it fits inside Maryland with room left over. 11 million people, 3 official languages, 6 separate governments to run a country most Americans couldn't locate on a map without help. When I landed in Brussels and took the train into the city center, the announcement came in Dutch, then French, then German, then English. 4 languages. 1 train. The conductor looked like he had delivered this sequence approximately 40,000 times and found it no more remarkable than the weather. That is Belgium's first paradox. A country small enough to drive across in 2 hours that cannot agree on what language to speak and has built an entire constitutional architecture around that disagreement rather than resolving it. The Flemish North speaks Dutch. The Walloon South speaks French. The small eastern cantons near Germany speak German. Brussels, the capital, is officially bilingual but effectively French-dominated while sitting geographically inside the Dutch-speaking region. The result is a federal system with 6 governments federal, 3 regional, 3 community administering 11 million people. When Belgians describe this to outsiders, they do it with the particular combination of exhaustion and dark humor of people who have been explaining the same absurd situation for their entire lives and have stopped expecting anyone to fully understand it. But here is what Tyler's question was pointing at. Belgium exists at the exact geographic and cultural fault line between the Germanic world and the Latin world. Every major power in European history, Rome, Spain, France, the Netherlands, Austria, Napoleon, Imperial Germany, Nazi Germany, has recognized this and tried to control it. Belgium has been invaded, occupied, liberated, and re-invaded more times per square kilometer than almost any territory on Earth. The flat northern plains offer no natural defense. The Ardennes forest in the south is impenetrable enough that 2 different 20th century German commanders thought it would stop an army and were wrong both times. The result of being invaded by everyone for 2,000 years is a population with a very specific relationship to power. Belgians are skeptical of it. They do not trust large national narratives. They do not trust uniforms. They negotiate. They compromise. They build elaborate consensus systems that look from the outside like dysfunction, but from the inside feel like the only rational response to a history of being overrun by people with very confident ideas about how things should be organized. I thought I understood this from books. I did not understand it until I stood in Ypres. Ypres is a small city in the Flemish region of western Belgium. It has a town square with a massive Gothic cloth hall and a cathedral and outdoor cafes and the particular unhurried quality of a provincial Belgian city on a Tuesday afternoon. It looks like a place where nothing much has happened. Everything about it is a reconstruction. The original city of Ypres was destroyed so completely during World War I that after the war there was a serious international debate about whether to rebuild it or leave it as a permanent ruin, a monument to what industrial warfare had done to a civilian settlement. The Belgians rebuilt it, stone by stone, arch by arch, from photographs and architectural drawings over decades. The cloth hall that stands there now is so precise a reconstruction that most visitors standing in the square do not know they are looking at something rebuilt from photographs. That choice to rebuild rather than memorialize the ruin tells you something essential about Belgium. It is not a country that performs its suffering. It absorbs it and continues. Beneath the reconstructed city, the soil of the surrounding farmland still contains the material of 4 years of continuous shelling. Farmers in the Ypres, salient the area of land that formed a bulge in the Allied lines, still plow up unexploded shells every spring. They call it the iron harvest. Belgian farmers have been finding and reporting live ordnance from World War I for over 100 years. The Belgian military's bomb disposal unit collects between 150 and 200 tons of unexploded munitions from farm fields around Ypres every single year. The war ended in 1918. The iron harvest continues in 2026. It will continue after us. Every evening at 8 o'clock, the last post is played at the Menin Gate, a massive memorial arch at the eastern edge of Ypres, inscribed with the names of 54,896 soldiers who died in the Ypres salient and whose bodies were never found. The ceremony has taken place every single evening since 1928, interrupted only during the years of German occupation in World War II. When the Allies liberated Ypres in 1944, the ceremony resumed the same night. I stood at the Menin Gate at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday in October. Local buglers played the last post under the arch. Around me, tourists from 30 countries, local Belgian families, a group of Australian veterans in their 80s, a school group of Flemish teenagers who had taken off their earbuds and were standing in unusual silence. The names on the arch above us were so numerous that they covered every surface, sides, ceiling, every stone, and still ran out of room. Another memorial nearby carries 45,000 more names of the missing. The sheer scale of the names produces a specific feeling that I have only encountered in a few places. Not grief exactly, something older. The sense of a debt so large it cannot be repaid and can only be acknowledged every evening in a small Flemish city by local volunteers who show up regardless of the weather. I thought about Tyler, about the maps of the Western Front I had shown him without ever spending a lesson on the specific ground beneath them, about what it means to teach a war without standing in the place where it happened, about what it means for the people who live on that ground to wake up every morning in a rebuilt city above a century of undetonated metal and plant their fields anyway, and collect the harvest that comes up with the iron, and show up at the gate every evening to play the notes that have been played there for nearly 100 years. That is not history. That is a place where the past has not finished arriving. I need to tell you something that stopped me completely when I first understood it. Not as a fact I had never encountered, as a fact I had never felt the weight of. Belgium did not become a country until 1830. Everything else happened first. The Roman occupation, the medieval cloth trade that made Flanders the wealthiest region in Northern Europe, the Spanish Habsburg rule, the French Revolutionary invasion, Napoleon, the Dutch annexation, and then, in 1830, the southern provinces of the Kingdom of the Netherlands revolted partly over language, partly over religion, partly over economic grievances, and Belgium declared independence and established a constitutional monarchy. It invited a German prince, Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, to become its first king. The country that had been at the center of European power struggles for 2,000 years had existed as a sovereign nation for less than 200 years. It is younger than the United States. Its current constitutional structure, the complex federal system with 6 governments, was not established until the 1970s and 1980s, through a series of painful constitutional reforms that were themselves the result of political crises so severe that the country went 589 days without a government in 2010 and 2011. setting a world record for the longest period any democracy has operated without a functioning national government. Belgium held the world record for governmental dysfunction, and during those 589 days, while politicians failed to form a coalition, while the linguistic communities refused to agree on the shape of any compromise, the country continued to function. GDP grew. Unemployment fell. The trains ran. The bomb disposal unit continued collecting iron from the farm fields around Ypres. The last post was played at the Menin Gate every evening at 8 o'clock. The Belgians have a phrase for this. They say, "Belgium works better without a government." They say it with the dark humor of people who have tested the hypothesis and found it holds. None of that was what broke me open completely. That came later. In a museum on the outskirts of Brussels that I almost didn't visit. The Royal Museum for Central Africa is in a town called Tervuren, 20 minutes by tram from the Brussels city center. The building is extraordinary, a neoclassical palace surrounded by formal gardens and a lake built by King Leopold II at the turn of the 20th century to showcase his colony in the Congo. Inside, tens of thousands of objects, animal specimens, ethnographic materials and artworks brought from the Congo during the years of Belgian colonial rule. It is one of the most comprehensive collections of Central African material culture anywhere in the world. It was built to display Leopold's possession, and it did that job with the architectural confidence of an empire that did not expect to be questioned. The museum closed for renovation in 2013 and reopened in 2018 with a fundamentally altered presentation, new context panels, acknowledgement of the colonial violence, explicit engagement with the history that produced the collection. The renovation was itself controversial. Some argued it did not go far enough, others that it went too far, others that the collection should be returned to the Democratic Republic of the Congo entirely. The guide who showed me through the museum was a Belgian woman in her 40s named Sophie. She had been working there for 11 years, through the renovation and after it. I asked her what it was like to give tours in this building. She was quiet for a moment in the way of someone choosing words that have been considered many times before. She said, "Every group is different. School children from Belgian schools, university students, tourists from the United States, Japan, Australia, and sometimes not often, but sometimes visitors from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And when that happens," she said, she stands in front of objects that were taken from the ancestors of the people standing next to her. Masks, musical instruments, everyday objects from villages that no longer exist in their original form. And she has to decide in real time what to say, how to say it, whether what the museum says about itself is adequate to the moment, whether her words are adequate to the moment. She said, "I have never found the right words. I keep trying to find them. That is why I keep coming back." That is the impossible choice Belgium lives with every day in that building. Not whether to have the collection, it exists, the objects are there, but what to say about how it got there, and whether saying it changes anything, and whether the saying is enough, and whether enough is even a category that applies. Let me tell you what Leopold II actually did, because most Americans have heard the name and have not heard what the name means. In 1885, at the Berlin Conference, where the major European powers divided Africa among themselves without consulting a single African, Leopold II was granted personal sovereignty over the Congo Basin, not as a Belgian colony, as his private property. He was the sole owner of a territory 2.5 million square kilometers in size, 85 times the size of Belgium. He had presented himself to the European powers as a humanitarian, a philanthropist, a man who would bring civilization and free trade to Central Africa. They believed him, or found it useful to act as if they did. What Leopold actually did was build a system of forced labor to extract rubber. The Congo forest was full of wild rubber vines. Global demand for rubber was exploding as the automobile industry grew. Leopold's agents moved through Congolese villages with a simple message: produce your rubber quota or face the consequences. The consequences were systematic and documented. Villages burned, hostages taken, hands cut off. The Force Publique, Leopold's private army, required its soldiers to produce a severed hand for every bullet used, to prove the bullets were not being wasted. The result was a system that produced baskets of human hands as administrative proof of compliance. The population of the Congo under Leopold's rule declined by an estimated 2 to 10 million people. The range reflects the limits of the historical record, not the limits of the atrocity. Edmund Morel, a young British shipping clerk, first understood what was happening when he noticed that ships arriving in Belgium from the Congo were laden with rubber and ivory, and departing loaded with weapons and ammunition, nothing else, no trade goods. Only weapons going in, extraction coming out. He built the first major international human rights campaign in modern history. Joseph Conrad had sailed the Congo River in 1890 and written what he saw into Heart of Darkness. The scandal became global. In 1908, under pressure, the Belgian government forced Leopold to relinquish the Congo. He died the following year. His funeral cortege was booed in the streets of Brussels. Belgium inherited the colony and governed it until Congolese independence in 1960. Before transferring sovereignty, Leopold had ordered the destruction of the Congo Free State archives, the financial records, the administrative documents, the evidence. Most of it was burned. I stood in the Tervuren Museum and looked at the objects behind the glass and thought about Tyler asking me why everything keeps happening in Belgium. And I thought, because the decisions made in small countries by small numbers of people with concentrated power have consequences that outlast them by centuries. Leopold II never visited the Congo, not once. He owned it for 23 years, extracted a personal fortune from it, and never set foot in it. He directed the whole operation from Belgium, from Brussels, from buildings that still stand, from a palace he built to display his trophy. The objects in the Tervuren Museum are beautiful. The craftsmanship in them is extraordinary, and they were taken from people who were being killed for rubber quotas by a man who never went to see what he was doing and deposited in a building designed to make him look like a benefactor. Sophie is still trying to find the right words. I understand why she keeps coming back. I am not sure the right words exist. Belgium is not only these wounds. That is the other thing I needed to understand, and that Tyler's question was also pointing toward. The country that produced this history also produced something else, something that is easy to miss if you are looking at Belgium only through its darkness. Bruges, a city in the Flemish north that reached the pinnacle of European commerce in the 14th century, the trading hub where Venice, England, the Hanseatic League, and the Arab world conducted business in the same streets, and then stopped. Its rivers silted up in the 15th century. The trade moved to Antwerp, then to Amsterdam. What remained was the architecture of a civilization frozen at its peak. The city does not perform its age. It simply continues to use it. That, too, is a form of continuation. In Ghent, 30 minutes east, the Gravenstein Castle at the center of the city since the 12th century. Inside it, the medieval count's collection of torture instruments, presented without drama. It is part of what the building was used for. The building is still there. Antwerp is the port city, second largest in Europe after Rotterdam. Around 4/5 of the world's rough diamonds are traded here, cut, evaluated, moved, concentrated in a few square blocks between the central station and a neighborhood where the community that built this trade has lived for centuries. That community is worth pausing on. The Antwerp diamond industry was built largely by the Hasidic Jewish community that settled here in the 16th century. They fled during World War II. The vast majority were murdered. After the war, the trade rebuilt in the same streets. The community rebuilt in the same neighborhood. Today, the district is shared with Flemish cutters and Indian and Israeli traders who now make up an increasing share of the business. I walked through on a Thursday morning. Men in black coats and hats, frosted glass storefronts, security present but quiet. Under my feet, 500 years of a trade interrupted by genocide and resumed. Like the Menengate ceremony, like Sophie returning to the museum, like Luke's fields giving back iron every spring. The continuation is itself a statement. It does not require a placard. Brussels is where the threads converge. The city that is simultaneously the capital of Belgium, the de facto capital of the European Union, and the headquarters of NATO. A city where more than a third of residents hold non-Belgian passports, diplomats, EU bureaucrats, NGO workers, lobbyists, international civil servants from over 180 countries living among the Belgian population. In a city that is already internally divided between its Dutch-speaking minority and its French-speaking majority, and which is geographically surrounded by the Dutch-speaking Flemish region that contains but does not govern it. Visual: metro doors opening at Schumann Station, morning rush, badge lanyards, multiple languages on the platform announcement board, commuters in business dress moving in every direction. I want to tell you something small that happened on my third morning in Brussels. I was in line at a coffee counter near the European Quarter, the part of the city where the EU buildings cluster together, glass and steel, and the particular self-importance of institutions that know they matter. The line was short. 5 people. The man in front of me ordered in French. The woman behind the counter replied in Dutch, then corrected to French mid-sentence. The man behind me, checking his phone, muttered something in what I later identified as Polish. The barista, who turned out to be from Portugal, took his order in English, confirmed it in French, and called it out in Dutch, because that was the name on the cup. 5 people, 1 transaction. 4 languages. Everyone got their coffee. This is not remarkable in Brussels. It is Tuesday morning. Visual: badge scanner at a building entrance, blue EU pass, then NATO lanyard, then a visitor badge in 3 languages. Diplomats walking between the Berlaymont and the Justice Lipsius building. A multilingual overhead announcement in the Gare du Midi. The European Commission, the European Council, the European Parliament's main working office, and NATO headquarters are all within a few kilometers of each other in eastern Brussels. More international organizations are headquartered here than in any other city in the world except New York. Every major global crisis, trade negotiations, military alliances, climate policy, sanctions regimes, is discussed, shaped, and often decided in buildings within walking distance of each other in a Belgian city that most Americans could not find on a map. Belgium became the center of European integration not by accident but by consensus. When the founders of what would become the European Union were looking for a location that would not provoke nationalist anxieties, not Paris, not Berlin, not Rome, Belgium presented itself as the country without a dominant national story. A country constitutionally committed to compromise between linguistic communities. A country that had learned, through centuries of being overrun, that the alternative to negotiation was worse. The European project chose Belgium because Belgium had already decided that the alternative to working together was not acceptable. I stood outside the Berlaymont building, the European Commission's headquarters, a glass and steel cross in eastern Brussels, and tried to hold together the things I had learned in the previous 10 days. The Menin Gate and the Iron Harvest, the Tervuren Museum and Sophie's Impossible Daily Choice, the reconstructed Cloth Hall in Ypres and the original Gothic architecture in Bruges and the Diamond District in Antwerp and the baskets of hands in the Congo and the constitutional crisis that lasted 589 days while the country continued to function. And this building, where civil servants from 27 countries work on the legal architecture of a political project that is, whatever its failures, the most successful attempt in human history to prevent the European powers from destroying each other. Belgium contains all of this simultaneously. It does not resolve it, it holds it. On my last day, I went back to Ypres. Not for the Menin Gate ceremony this time. I wanted to walk the farmland outside the city, to see what the iron harvest actually looks like in practice. A farmer named Luke showed me his field on the southern edge of the salient. He was in his 50s. His family had farmed this land for 3 generations. He walked me to a section of fence where several rusted objects were arranged, shells of various sizes, a piece of corroded metal that had been a rifle barrel, a curved fragment that he identified as a mortar casing from World War I. He had found all of these in the previous planting season. He had called the Belgian military, as required by law. The disposal team would come and remove them within the month. In the meantime, they sat at the fence. He showed me, with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who has done this hundreds of times, how to identify a live shell versus inert metal, the shape of the casing, the condition of the fuse. The particular weight of something that still contains its original charge after a century in Belgian soil. He said that in his experience, about 1 in 4 of the objects he found still had the potential to detonate. He had found live gas shells. He had found shells with their fuses intact. He treated each finding the same way. Call it in, step back, wait for the disposal team. He did not find this remarkable. He found it agricultural. This is what farming on this land means. You plant, you harvest, you collect the iron, you call it in, you plant again. I thought about Tyler's question the whole drive back to Brussels. Why does every major thing in history keep happening in Belgium? Because Belgium is where the forces meet. The geographic fault line between North and South, Germanic and Latin, sea power and land power, ancient empire and modern nation state. Because a small country in the wrong location or the right location, depending on how you measure, absorbs history the way Luke's fields absorb iron. It goes in, it stays. It comes up every spring when the ground turns over. And because the people who live there have developed over centuries of being in the middle of everyone else's ambitions, a very specific kind of intelligence. The intelligence of people who know that the alternative to working things out is someone else deciding for you. The intelligence of compromise. The intelligence of continuing. 6 governments, 3 languages, 589 days without a federal government. The world's largest diamond trade concentrated in a few square blocks. The headquarters of the institutions that govern the free world. An impossible museum with an impossible collection and a guide who keeps coming back because she hasn't found the right words yet. A farmer who knows how to identify a live shell by feel and treats it as an ordinary part of the agricultural year. That is what Belgium does, every day, in 6 languages if you count the dialects. The semester after I came back, Tyler was in my 4th period class again. He'd signed up for the Advanced European History elective. On the first day he walked in, sat down, and said, "So, did you figure it out? Did you answer my question?" I had been thinking about how to answer him since the drive back from Luke's farm. I told him, Belgium isn't where history happened once. Belgium is where history keeps happening. It is where the forces meet the languages, the empires, the trenches, the atrocities, the institutions built to prevent the next atrocity. It absorbs all of it the way Luke's fields absorb iron. It goes in, it stays, it comes back up every spring. Tyler thought about this for a moment. Then he said, "So it's like the country that history won't leave alone." Yes, I told him, exactly that. And the remarkable thing is that the people who live there have learned to farm around it. I finally knew how I would answer Tyler. It only took me going there to find it. If this story changed how you think about a place you had overlooked, I'd genuinely like to know what stayed with you most. Tell me where you're watching from. Belgium is smaller than Maryland. Yet the trenches where your great-grandfather's generation bled dry are there. The building where the rules of your international trade are written is there. The museum where the objects of a forgotten atrocity sit behind glass, waiting for the right words, is there. The farms where the ground gives back a century of iron every spring are there. Belgium isn't where history happened once. Belgium is where history keeps happening. This narrative is presented through the perspective of James Callahan, a fictional American history teacher. All locations, historical facts, and events, including the Menin Gate, the Iron Harvest, the Royal Museum for Central Africa in Tervuren, Leopold II's Congo Free State, the Berlin Conference, Edmund Morel's campaign, the 589-day Belgian governmental crisis, the Antwerp diamond industry, and the headquarters of NATO and the EU in Brussels are real and described as accurately as possible. James Callahan, Margaret, Tyler, Luke, and Sophie are fictional. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.